I actually spoke at Agile Austin, oh man, 3 or 4 years ago. So it's a great conference. Hope to return someday soon. So my name is Mary Thorn. I am the VP of IT Strategy and Transformation at S&P Global Ratings. I have been doing scaling, using multiple scaling tools over the past probably 10 years of my career. I think I started using SAFe at version 3. I've done some Scrum at Scale. I've done some less. I've done some DAD at different financial technology companies and as a consultant before I came back full time post pandemic. So a lot of good fun there. This presentation is a presentation that I will be doing at SAFe Summit. So my first thing I want to ask for you guys is love feedback post presentation. My email is marythorn@gmail.com. Please give me feedback on something I could have done better, or you didn't understand something I could explain better, so that when I go there in a month that I can do better. It is a customer story. It's a 30-minute slot, and so and my topic is around lean portfolio management. All right, so here I go. All right, let me get ready here. I started S&P Global about 2.5, 3 years ago, but before that, I was a consultant. I was consultant for 2 of their other divisions. With that said, when I got there, somebody had come in, and I don't know who it was. All positive stuff. The president, right? We have 4 divisions. The president of the company said we're going all in Agile, and so all 4 divisions, with the president of the company saying we're going all in Agile, then the presidents of each division followed the lead. So we were going to go all in on Agile. That meant what's happened was one division took the lead, and they created an Agile framework, which was lightly based on the tools from the scaled app from SAFe. When I say that, things that were common were they use essential SAFe patterns, meaning most of these divisions had maybe 20, 30 Scrum teams 5 years ago. Okay, so what they did is they would put everybody on one art or one train or one value stream, and they would have a prioritization process for that. They all were on the same sprint with the same release cadence, with the same language. Okay, now at that point in time, they were still a project mindset company, not a product mindset. So they were doing Agile projects on a fixed cadence. And it actually, and everybody transformed from waterfall to Scrum in that 3 years or 5 years ago. It actually worked fairly decent that's all the tools that they needed, mostly Scrum with the prioritization process for these projects. And it got them to a point of some agility. As each division grew, they started having scaling problems. At the division I was at, it was like 30 teams. Another division I was at 200 teams. So this is a story about the division that I was within S&P Global for the 200 teams. So one of the biggest problems from them is they were merger and acquisition division. They had started this as a small company with 20 to 30 teams. Over that 5 years, they merged with a couple of other companies, that one division, and they grew to 200 teams. They had a migration path to move from one monolithic app to another, or to the new platform. And to do this, they were using Scrum, and they were also using everybody was on this project management framework of doing projects. So basically they would spend 3 days every quarter with the executives in a room with 200 projects, with 200 Scrum teams, prioritizing the work for those teams with the C levels or the level down. And the biggest problem is they would do this prioritization process, and it was really painful. What would happen is that they would go then to actually do the work, and because of this monolithic apps, and we know that at scale monolithic apps have a lot of dependencies. So they would prioritize this work. They would think the teams could map and do the work, but because of the dependencies, they would never ever get anything done in that cycle or that PI or that quarter of work, because they didn't have visibility into the dependencies. So this was a growth problem. So if I summarize the 3 problems that we had, it was mostly around prioritization was painful because of the scale. The architectural dependencies was painful because of the merger and acquisition, and then the move from onto a new platform. And 3, we needed really to move them to this product mindset to be able to understand where the roadmap's going to be, where we're going, how are we going to get there, what is the forecast of that roadmap? Because we were at a project mindset, we could not forecast roadmaps, and so we couldn't also align to value streams. So that was our problem statement, and it was when I got hired. I will never forget the first one-on-one I had with the president of that division. They said to me, "Mary, I don't care what you do first, but you have got to fix the prioritization process for us. We cannot spend 3 days every quarter with the C-levels. And by the way, they don't know the details of these projects good enough to be able to prioritize the work. And so they're getting data and data. It's just 3 days of things. And then we never get what we prioritized." So they were really frustrated. When you think about that problem statement, and I hear it, when I was a consultant, I heard it. When at this new division I'm at within the company, same problem statement. Like we are at this project mindset. How do we move to this product mindset? How do we prioritize our work at scale? So I told them, like, this is very normal. It's normal as you grow, that you hit the scale, that you have these problems. So my thought process is, we're going to use some of the tools out of the Scaled Agile Framework toolbox, because I know that they can solve the problems quickly. You also have to remember I was a team of 1 coming in. I didn't have a team, so I had to use training materials that I could run with. I could have used other tools out of the other scaling frameworks. I felt though with this fintech and where we're at that it was best to use some of the tools of the Scaled Agile Framework toolbox. Okay. So when we started thinking about, the first thing I did is we implemented the lean portfolio management competency out of Scaled Agile Framework. That 3 areas consist of strategy and investment funding, portfolio operations, and lean governance. Okay. And so when we started this model and understanding how we're going to solve these problems, the first problem that I don't think are fully understood at scale, and when you implement something like lean portfolio management, is who are all the stakeholders to actually engage with that many product lines, with that many portfolios. We ended up having 10 portfolios, 24 arts. So we had 10 really different executive teams. And so we did several exercises, and I really like the model around, I don't know if you guys have seen the stakeholder management model, but it talks about people with high influence or high power and people with high interest and or low interest. And I would go to each portfolio grouping of leaders and businesses and go through this exercise to really understand who are the players, who are the people that can make long-standing strategic decisions. That exercise took me a good month to really understand who has the right to understand where we're going to go with who has the strategy first. That's always fun. Who has a strategy? What is that strategy? Do they have the right to make decisions on that strategy? And do they have decisions on how much we want to invest in that strategy? And lean portfolio management all is about trying to align strategy to execution. And so when you get the right stakeholders who have a long-term strategy, and you get them in the group, now you have to say, okay, from a prioritization perspective, we're going to remove you from the day-to-day short decision-making decisions around which project or which feature needs to happen. We're going to elevate you to make long-standing epic level decisions so that you can say, okay, for the next year, do I want to invest in this epic or this bet? And once we were able to identify the right players, the people that had high power and high interest, we were able to take that group of business owners, of product leaders, of tech leaders, and have better conversations of what is our strategy for this portfolio? What is the bets that we want to play? And we got them out of the day-to-day minutia and asked, well, how much do you want to invest in that within the teams that you've been given? And that started to help decouple long-term standing strategy decisions. And we pushed down the prioritization of features of those, the work breakdown structures of epics, feature stories, the features and stories, the day-to-day, the quarterly release prioritization down into the people who actually do that work every day, to like either the value stream leadership team or the art leadership team. We were able to do this for 3 reasons. One is when the president of the company stands up in front of you and say, hey, we're going all in Agile. And then 5 years later, the president of the company says, we have these pain points. So if you think about Kotter's 8 steps to change, the sense of urgency for these stakeholders to buy in was there because the president of the company said, I don't ever want to talk about prioritization in the next 6 months, Mary, so fix it, right? And so all of her directs and the people that I needed to have impact with were there to help me with, roll this out. So that's the first thing. The second thing is because of that, I got them into training. There's only a few, because when you have that executive leadership, I got them into leading safe training. I got, some of them went to the lean portfolio management training, right? They bought in and they understood the role that they played and how that went. And the third thing is that the role confusion started to be eliminated. There was some role confusion in the way that we were operating. But if we had not had the right stakeholders there at first, we would not have been able to be as successful as we were. So stakeholder management, deciding what stakeholders that you choose is imperative to start any type of scaling journey around LPM. The second thing that I wish I could have, it's like one of those magic balls that I wish I could magic 8 balls. When you go into a customer, if I was a consultant, if I was going into a customer or whatever, is to understand the characteristics of their financial systems. A lot of folks are still doing, things like, what's your run versus grow percentage of the work that you do? They still do that in Excel. A lot of companies, even at scale, are doing that on Excel spreadsheets. When I ask them questions around, hey, where are your bets being placed? Is it right, horizon 1, 2, or 3, right? Like, do you have short-term bets, you have medium-term bets, and you have long-term bets? There's no type of framework for them to even categorize that. So they don't even know where their bets are being placed at in those horizons. They cost modeling. They don't actually understand or have the financial systems to be able to handle where the costs or how to track costs. How much have we spent on this thing? They don't have the revenue modeling. How do we model ROI? And we need to do that same across every epic because we want to compare apples to apples. How do we track that? How do you understand how much money you have to invest from a Scrum team level? Even getting a report of how much does a Scrum team cost? What does an average Scrum team cost? It's location based. It's a Scrum team in Asia is cheaper than a Scrum team in America. How do you handle that when you go to investment and we don't know which teams are going to work on it yet? And so what I found is that at scale, a lot of these things start to break down. Hey, can you also give me the data around how much money I'm spending within this business line? What's the TCO? They don't look at their business a lot. A lot of companies are still at scale in this technology functional silo, analytical, like different functional silos, sales, marketing, where you can't understand the TCO from a product end to end. And so one of the things that I work heavily with as we move forward, and that I've learned now, having implemented lean portfolio management a couple of times, one of the first things you have to hit from day one is going in and understand all the characteristics of all these questions, and where and what the current state is, and how can we start to get to a future state where we can move more to find TCO, have a weighted cost model, have a weighted revenue model, have a way to track your run versus grow, have a way to track your horizons. Really important to understand all those features when you're thinking about aligning strategy to execution. And then lean portfolio management, I like to say, it is an art. It's not a science, and not art. There's no pun intended from a safe art word, but it's like literally a science. How you build your portfolio design, your value stream design, your OKRs design, how you design your budgets. Do you have all the skills when you move to value streams? How do you do your roadmaps? How do you do dependencies across all of this stuff? This is around the governance piece, right? When you first take a look at the flow of value for your organization and start to be able to report out against that, you have to ensure that that all aligns, that you understand what is in a business. What are all the activities, all the steps? What are all the areas where people are involved? And then at the end of the day, what is the outcome for that work at the end, at the end of every 3, 6, 9, 12 months? I found that it's one of those things where my coaching is to just get started. It's never going to be perfect. What I've seen is, especially even where I'm at now, is they want some things to kind of be definitive, be perfect. And my general recommendation is, don't be perfect. We're going to start out 60-70% in direction to get this started, and we're going to learn as we go, and we're going to modify as we go. But you just have to get started. And there really is not a lot of science behind it. The fourth one, I almost want to say that this is the one that really surprised me over the last 2 to 3 implementations. When you move from a project mindset to a product mindset, people have a really hard time to say, if my, hey, it used to be that at the end of a quarter, if my project wasn't finished, that meant we failed. That meant that we weren't going to, that there's no way we can meet any of our intended outcomes for the year. And what I found by implementing OKRs is that OKRs are the outcomes that you want to have to achieve in the next 6 to 12 months. And sometimes you might be doing an epic, and it might have 3, 4, 5 kind of MVPs or releases through that year. And maybe the first 2 were on track, but maybe the third one does shift right. Well, what we found a lot of times is a lot of the business value is in the first or second MVP. And just because because of that, 80%, sometimes 80% of the value is already achieved. That when you get to that third MVP and it shifts right, you still can hit your OKR, even though you might not have, even though it might be delayed, say 3 months. And so it's really hard. I mean, it's a really hard transition for the people in that project mindset, all the leaders, all the senior leaders, all the board folks, to go from, hey, we are delayed, we aren't going to finish, to, hey, it's okay, we're still going to meet our outcomes, but it's like, hey, that prove it, proof's in the pudding kind of thing. And so I will say, OKRs did save us in several of those conversations. Yes, we are delayed. No, we didn't hire those folks early enough. Hey, it's okay. We still could meet the outcome that we had said that we were going to achieve for this year. So trying to move away from those output metrics to those outcome metrics, and to be able to govern that was something that was key. And you really needed to define upfront, early, as fast as possible to be able to start to shift that mindset sooner. Don't do that. Don't do this part of it last or later on. And this one's interesting, right? So transparency is a core is a core value of SAFE, and it has its ups and downs. So what does that mean? The positives about transparency is in implementing LPM is it really does show you where you're aligned and not aligned to your strategy with your execution. It allows you also to govern, is your strategy, working? It also makes sure that your alignment to the operations. But what it also shows you, and it's not that it's negatives, but it is the transparency piece that people sometimes don't like, is not all of the epic hypothesis or the epics that you have or the hypothesis validate true. So not all your bets hit. Now you could say that's always been the case. But when you start to really, the tools that SAFE has in the toolbox to help track, are these bets, are these OKRs moving? Some of the leaders who used to do these special projects and get away with it, and then it didn't pan out, didn't take the feedback, didn't pivot, we're starting to get really upset when that transparency was going all the way up. They used to hide things like that. Sometimes the outputs were incentivized more than the outcomes. And now we were trying to incentivize outcomes. And that was a big issue with the transparency piece. We put the OKRs, really put those incentives in perspective. Like, here is the real outcomes we're trying to have for the year. And so it's not that I'm saying, I would really say it's error on the side of transparency. But there are consequences that we're going to have to put things under. Things are going to come in the microscope, and we'll have to lift the veil, and there'll be some crucial conversations. It's not that we shouldn't be transparent, but I need, to be 5 things you should know before you implement this, that there are going to be very hard conversations to have once you implement something like LPM at scale. So what was the outcomes for us? In these problem statements, if you come back to the problem statements that we had a prioritization problem, we had a dependency management problem, we had a project to product problem. So after we implemented LPM, the first thing is that we had a retirement prioritization party retirement because it was so painful for everybody. And when we decentralized the prioritization into the value streams and lifted up the business owners and the leaders to do strategic thinking, understand where the investments want to happen, they felt like they were working at the right level. So the roles and responsibilities also helped. We ended up it really started to align our strategy to our execution, and it allowed us to focus on the customer feedback. And we really were dogmatic around that and taking that feedback and put it into epics. And if the epics weren't validated or the MVPs were not hitting, we were pivoting. So we ended up having the highest NPS score we've had ever over the 2 years after we implemented LPM. And so from an outcome base for me, from a APMO seat in the house, NPS score was one of my outcomes that if we were building the right thing that aligned to the strategy, that would really be a key win for us. We also had a 50% reduction in dependency. So we actually tracked dependencies that used to be in this project-based mindset. From a lean portfolio governance perspective, we said, okay, once we move into these value streams and we put the right skills into those value streams, how much do we still have to go outside of them to be able to get our work done? And so we actually reduced that 50% over the 2 years. And the last thing is we actually reduced a significant amount of our technical debt because we were able to understand how the debt impact the outcomes. We had technical debt epics or they were MVPs as part of our business epics that we were able to get in to be able to help us reduce that long-term risk. So, the lean portfolio management is, I think, a key at scale to be able to understand, align your strategy to your execution, take it and govern that from your operations perspective, and then continuously improve that from your portfolio operations perspective. It is a key to scaling Agile at scale. So, thank you. All right, guys, what questions do you guys have? So that's the end of that presentation.
So there's lots of good questions in the chat that I think we can start with. So,
oh, Ben, just a note, I can't see chat questions, so you're going to have to ask them to me. I'm sorry.
Yeah. That's all right. Happy to. So, yeah, Eduardo asks, what percentage of the budget run versus transform was considered in this portfolio?
Well, at first we didn't know. So first off the lean portfolio management we did was we baselined it. So we took a quarter to baseline. Here's what it is. Is that acceptable? So we would take that to the strategic review board or the OpCo and say, all right, we baselined it. It was, I don't remember what the first one was. Let's say it was, 60-40. Is that acceptable? Right. And so the thing about run versus grow that aligns is also the horizons. So run being 60 might be okay, but what we really started to care more about is that 40% of are we looking at 5-year bet from now? Or are we going to look at a 2-year bet from now? Where is that grow coming? And is it, and what horizon? So one of the things we found is that we were doing a lot of, next year work, next year getting ready, but we weren't really experimenting in some of the, further out horizons.
Right. And so Mary, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. So here's from that 60-40, right? So I'm assuming you are in an IT organization, is that right? Or
yes.
Okay, so same case for me, right? I mean, we have 60% of our budget runs the IT. 40% is investment, and I'm ready to propose that we inject this view of lean portfolio management, but I cannot go with the full 40, with the 40%. So did you where did you start, like the 40%, or what percentage of the checkbook did you initiate your LPM journey?
So it's really so I don't want to give you the consulting answer, but I have to, because the reason why I have to is every product is at a different life cycle. So for one portfolio who's building brand new products, they're at an 8. I had some portfolios that were at an 80% grow budget and 20% run budget. And I had some products in portfolios that were 80% run because it was in lights on only kind of maintenance mode, and 20% grow, which was very small features. So I think you have to look at your product set, the life cycle of where they're at, and really understand what the maintenance is, and then set a target, and then you track against that target. So I have several reports that I can run at any point in time to say, what is my current run versus grow, and does this seem right compared to where the product set is in the life cycle of the journey? Does that make sense? I can't just say it's 60-40.
No. How many products did you have in your portfolio? Do you remember?
I had 10 portfolios, and I think overall that we had 600 applications.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So then Red writes, do we really need to know the cost of the team rather than do we have work for team X for 75% of PI?
At the investment review board, you have to decide. So I'm sorry, strategic review board. When you're talking about investment funding or doing participatory budgeting in the SAFE LPM module, you have to be able to understand how much money you have to invest in certain epics. And so to do that, this is where you got to understand your financial characteristics. Do you have, let's say that we're doing at this beginning of the year, is there a 10% growth number that you can go and hire 10% more Scrum teams? Okay, well, let's say that's $2 million. So you've got $2 million extra to play with. And then you had your budget from last year. Let's say it's 10 million. So now you've got 12 million to invest in for the year. We will take, let's say we take 50% run out of that. So 50% run leaves you $6 million. But you have to know that $6 million is most of the time is the 2 million you just got additionally, and the 4 million is existing Scrum team capacity. So you have to know how much of that is Scrum team to be able to understand where you invest your money. Does that help, Red?
Well, it's just that I've seen so many companies wrap themselves around the ankle at precision on making sure that all these other economies, the different grades of individual, you get exactly the right dollar amount. It's like, guys, the most important thing is where's the team and can we get the work done? And so I understand where you're coming from, but
this is a different conversation. It's not for the PI. It's for the conversation I'm having is at the epic level, right? Like
understood.
Here's your work. The one thing I will say that we did this time that I think was a key to the characteristics factor is we had scrum teams that were in India versus the US, and we know that the scrum team cost is completely different. So we came up with a blended rate and we said, okay, we have 60 teams at X amount. And that made our budget, whatever, 10 million. I don't know. I can't give you real numbers, 10 million. And so that made it easier to talk about an investment. Is this going to be done? We took away the whole question of which team's going to do it. So, hey, do we want to place $2 million on this bet? Yes. Okay. Here's 2 million, that 2 million. What they don't have to know, that 2 million is 4 scrum teams in the back, and that's going to be working on that.
Okay. So it was blended rate across all geographies?
Yes. Across all.
Okay.
And it really helped. I did it wrong the first time, Red. The first time I ever implemented LPM, I did it. Oh no, 250 for India, not million for Scrum, for the US, and this one has to work. It was a mess. So we just blended across all geographies, had one fixed number, and it made it so much easier to talk about from an investment perspective.
Okay, I completely applaud that. That's a fantastic change. I love that.
Yeah.
So Eduardo asks, what makes this lean versus not lean?
Gosh, it's hard to even answer that because the way that they were doing it before, but the way that I've seen most companies do this part around is that's not lean and this is leaner than that. And so then I think the question, Eduardo, is how much more leaner can it get?
Right. That's
right.
a good way to put it, right?
There are improvements that we can do. Examples, things like how much do you really have to govern? So we got to a point where we just governed OKRs. We didn't really govern the epic healths anymore or the roadmaps or, all that mattered is, are we on track to meet our OKRs? If not, what is the ask for the business owners or for the people that LPM, the executives?
And maybe part of the question, Mary, is because those epics, right? Those things that were prioritized at this level, did they have a discovery brief? Did they have, what things did they have? And now I'm assuming they had a blended rate of cost amongst those things that were needed to figure out if this was truly the next item of value in the backlog, right?
So the epic has a lean business case and it has a bet. So typically what happens is that there's some idea that comes out. The idea is already has been through some type of innovation phase, Gemba walks, customer, feedback, prototyping, will they buy it, right? And so we go through that, and when we know that this is an idea that's 2 to 5 years from now that we want to really, or sorry, not 1 to 5 years. We know that we want to go after that in a 1 to 5 year time frame, right? Because that's why I said you have to have your bets in different places. What is for the next year? What is the work that we want to focus on, and what's the outcome of that work? And so an epic has a lean business case. An epic has a cost model. An epic has a revenue model. Right. So when you think about definition of ready for an epic might have a prototype, right? It might have some wireframes and mock-ups. And so then from that point, the estimates, right? The cost estimates come from how many scrum teams for a year how many scrum teams would it take to finish this epic within a year? And then you break that down into quarterly chunks. Does that help?
Yep, it does. Thank you.
So Red asks, should folks be aware of the transparency payment training to get ahead of it?
This has to do with your comment about those very tough conversations as transparency makes it up into the organization.
I bring it up in a way, it's a fair question. So you kind of don't know at the beginning of LPM implementing how people are going to react when bets fail. You just don't know. You learn really quickly. I've had those leaders, and this is the trend I see, not just where I'm at, but most places, is a leader comes up with a great idea, they think, from a customer. They implement the first release, they get feedback, and nobody's using it. Well, they're like, okay, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to do the next release and make them use this thing, and then they don't use it. And then I'm going to do another release, so all this work for 6 to 12 months, and they gave you feedback in the first release that it didn't solve any problems for them. They don't need to use this. They don't want it. And so that's the piece where you don't know until you get into it, when people won't pivot. Oh, I've got my, I've talked about it, like, hey, if you have incentives based on getting this epic done, and the epic hypothesis validates false, your bonus is screwed. And I will talk to the executives about that. So I really try to tell them, don't incentivize the work, incentivize the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Does that help?
Yes, and I love that. It's another beautiful point.
Yeah.
And Eduardo had another question about the NPS. Was it the NPS of the APMO?
Oh, sorry. No, that was the NPS of the product. So we had one major product that 150 of the 200 Scrum teams worked on. Now that product had several applications, but it went from like a 30 point, which is not bad, NPS score, to a 50 point NPS, 55 point actually NPS score, which was really good.
Cool. Red also asks, how did you measure tech debt?
That one was great. So I actually like the word, at least in financial companies, I like the word operational risk a little bit better than tech debt. So we started talking about what is our operational risk and how are we going to quantify that? And at different divisions, operational risk is a lot different. So one of the divisions I'm in, heavy regulated, one division not regulated at all. So from a operational risk perspective, in one division, couldn't get anything done. Operational risk in the division that we're talking about here, we were able to do it faster with more visibility. And so for us, how we measured it was, we actually created a category. So a category in your ADO or your tooling system, and we would label technical debt, but we tried to enter either an epic or a feature or an MVP of all the technical debt that we knew, and so we could run a report and see how much we were getting done every quarter.
Cool.
Sorry, just
go
a
ahead.
quick follow-up. So I'm assuming automated testing was in there somewhere. Did that actually come through as an operational risk?
So we handled testing two different ways. It depended, again, I had 10 portfolios. One way is we actually had MVPs under existing work that said, hey, if you're in this area of code, we also want you to increase the test coverage, which would show up as a technical debt item in the backlog. But then we also changed, things like gated check-ins where you couldn't check in code without 0 tests. So you couldn't make it worse than you left it, like the Boy Scout rule. We actually wanted you to make it better before you left it. And so that really helped us from that perspective. We tried to take existing work with the work. So our theory more was take existing work and give it a little bit of a bigger estimate. So instead of a 5-point story, maybe it's an 8-point story to get the testing done, versus having only technical debt stories. Now, it's not saying we didn't do that. But the 80-20 rule was try to use existing work to increase your code coverage. 20% rule would be write a tech debt story for, testing story to clear the gaps.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. So Gina writes, how did you work in organizational changes as this progressed? Realignment of teams to product, upskilling or adding talent, etc.
Yeah, so that's a great question. As we rolled out each value stream, the value stream one, Gene's probably seen it, the skills, maybe you're 60% there because you line these teams and you're like, wait a minute, I needed that skill over there, but they can't come because they have something bigger. We did focused skill analysis. So for each value stream, we did here's the roadmap, here's the work that we think is going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months. Here's the skills that we need based on that roadmap. Each team, here's your skills. Each team, here you are. What are your skills? What level of skill do you have? And where's our gap? And so we did a really calculated skill gap analysis, and we tracked that. The other thing that really helps with that, by the way, is SAFE has PI planning, and they have a dependency management board. And so when you start to see teams going outside of their team for dependencies, because usually 5 out of 10 times it's for a skill that they don't have in their team, we were able to also track, okay, here's the people skill gap analysis, but then here's like the business knowledge gap analysis, or here's this, here's other skills we didn't really know that we needed. So we use that dependency board to understand why are we having to go outside of our team or our train to do work, and we align those. And so we dogmatically tracked, are we getting better? And that's really how we got to that 50% reduction in dependencies, because half the time when we went outside of our team or outside of our arts was because of skill gaps. Jenna, did that help? I feel like I answered half that question.
No, that was great. Thank you. As far because what I was really looking for was how did you progress? Did you have a massive project where you did a big organizational realignment, and you said it's incremental and by value stream? And great tip on the dependency management board. Thank you.
But by the way, you have to train your leadership team on some of these skill analysis toolings. A lot of times people are like, oh, I think I need this. Like, it's not really like, I'm pretty dogmatic around just like, here's a tool for the problem, try the tool instead of winging it. So on the skill stuff, I'm like, hey, here's a spreadsheet. Here's where you put your skill. Here's you put your team. Here's how you level it out. And let's track this. RT, help the dev leaders and test leaders ensure that we have the right skills on the train, or Scrum Master. So
Great, thank you.
Can I ask a quick follow-up?
sure.
Ben, do we have
Please.
time?
Yeah, we got time.
Okay, so it's been my experience that the middle management, their job changes, there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and dread, and they have absolutely no idea how to get to this new world, so they resist the movement.
Mhm.
If you experience such a thing, how do you pass it?
100%. Gartner says number 3 reasons why transformations fail. It's one of the 3 reasons transformations fail. Excuse me. I say I want my team scrumming at all levels. What does that mean? So you have your scrum team or a Kanban team. Then you have the leadership team of those teams. And then you usually have another layer of leadership above that. And I want the leadership teams to scrum as well. So what does that mean? So Red, or whoever asked that, at the end of the day, I want the leadership team of the people that they're managing to have a backlog of improvements. So if I give the example of, let's say you have 6 scrum teams, and in that 6 scrum teams, you maybe have 3 dev managers that manage 2 scrum teams each. And let's say you have just 1 test manager that manages all 6. So you've got 4 mid-level leaders. Okay. You typically, like in SAFE, you might have an RTE and you might have a product manager. So that leadership team, to me, that is your art level or your team level or your essential, trained leadership team. I want them to look at, what's the strategy for the next 3 to 6 months? What skills do you need? What are the technical challenges we have? What's the architectural runway we need? They have a backlog of improvements. And so the first thing that I do, though, when I build that team is I actually put them in a room and it's just that leadership team. And I'll put a blank piece of paper on the wall. And I'll put dev manager on the wall, put test manager on the wall. I'll put Agile coach or RTE on the wall. I'll put system architect on the wall, product manager. And I will ask them to go and fill out the responsibilities for all the roles of everybody in the room, except for the role that you're playing. And what you find is perceptions of responsibilities that people think you should be doing and of that team together. So the team, we go around the room and say, okay, is it true that the dev manager is responsible for, technical XP practices? Yes. Is it true that, that the dev manager is responsible for delivery of our projects? No, that's the team. That shouldn't be on there, right? They're accountable, but they're not responsible. That's different, right? So I do this workshop with them to make sure that they understand what they should be doing, and so that they can move forward, and everybody with them understands their role. Does that help?
Yeah, it's a good start, because then the question is, okay, and I'm sure you've run across this, when the person isn't conforming to the new way, very difficult things that have to take place in the organization. It's not, Agile coaches aren't out there to get rid of people. We're up to upskill, but if you're not willing to make the move, then somebody else has to make the move.
Yeah, so this is where there's usually one level leadership above that, right? And this is where, the Agile coach or the RT could potentially, raise that risk to the leader, his leader, escalate that transparency, the impact of the behaviors. The second thing I do is we actually do a culture shaping workshop where we talk about what are the behaviors that we are aspiring to for these teams. And we talk about how when you cast a shadow of the leader, and how if you don't emulate the behaviors that we're talking about that we want everybody else to aspire to, then we won't change. And so we have communication, we that starts to create a common communication where, let's say one of the we will act with a sense of urgency, and maybe that's one of our behaviors that we want to aspire to. If that leader who you're having problems with is one of those that never makes decisions, drags his feet on everything, as a peer on that scrum team, as the Agile coach, I'm coaching them to say, hey, dev leader, here's the behavior. Remember our working agreement. These are the behaviors that we're aspiring to, and you're not leading with this behavior. And so everybody behind you is not acting with any urgency either. And so I think it's, we all know culture eats strategy for breakfast. Good gosh, strategy eats breakfast. I cannot speak. Peter Drucker, strategy, culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. And so we really want, those people that aren't changing, we have to have that culture conversation. We have to talk about what are those behaviors we're aspiring to. And if they're not changing, then the impact it has. And that sometimes has to be escalated after you've coached that.
Thank you.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Any other questions, follow-ups?
So here's one last one, I promise. So Mary, if that organization where you implemented your LPM was not a safe organization, what do you think would have been the problems that you would have encountered?
Well, they weren't a safe organization.
Oh, they were not.
They were just Scrum and had implemented some safe tools like common cadence, common language.
Okay.
And the problems was we had a prioritization problem that was ridiculous. 3 days in a room with the C-levels, prioritizing 200 projects across 200 Scrum teams.
So really the LPM implementation went along with the language and some of the practices of SAFe.
Yeah.
Okay.
It solved our prioritization problem. It solved our dependency problem, and it solved our I would say alignment problem.
Yeah.
Right.
It is the alignment. That's alignment. That's what it manifests.
Yes,
Right.
that's right. So if I could ask you guys, my email is marythorn@gmail.com. If you have issues with the slides, we have to keep the slides pretty generic, but if the stories doesn't resonate, if I miss points that you feel like I should have covered, please send me feedback. This is the first time I've done it. Obviously, you probably, saw me messing with words, but the way I operate from a speaker's perspective is I do it 2 or 3 times, and the third, fourth time I've got it. But like this was me just, trying to test run with you guys. So love if you guys could give me some feedback, that would be awesome.
Well, thanks, Mary. I really appreciate the time you took for the presentation for us. It was great. And yeah, per our conversation at the start of the meeting, the recording won't be available until after the conference. We're beginning giving the presentation, but eventually it'll be on the Agile Austin YouTube channel, and we'll be promoting that throughout our social media as well. So thanks for joining, everyone. Appreciate it. One final call out. We are looking for speakers for Keep Austin Agile later this year. Just posted that site there. So please go to that if you're interested in speaking or interested in what the conference is about. So appreciate everyone's time. Thanks again. And we will see you next month.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.